When it comes to video game mascots, there are a few that are as symbolic and as famous as Sonic the Hedgehog. Even if you've never played his games before, chances are you've seen him everywhere, whether on backpacks, lunchboxes, toys, TV, and even movies. I have to admit that Sonic has been going through some rocky times since the 2000s, and the 2010s haven't exactly been kind to him. Sure, we got great stuff like Sonic Mania, but at the same time we also got Sonic Lost World, Sonic Boom, and Sonic Forces. Those games were considered to be disappointments, and it's a shame that Sonic can no longer keep its momentum like he did in the 90s. However, the movie was surprisingly decent, and seeing that it's been a while since Sonic Forces came out, we can hope that Sega's had time to iron out a good Sonic game. You better not disappoint me, Sega. Until that game comes, we can always look back and play Sonic's biggest hits. Since Sonic has recently turned 30, I thought it would be fun to look back and play a game that celebrates the Blue Hog's past. No, not that game. Instead, I'm going to be reviewing Sonic Generations, the game that celebrated the 20th anniversary of Sonic. So for this review, I'm going to celebrate with a game that was a celebration of the series. Whoa, that's deep. With that said, it's been 10 years since Sonic Generations came out, so does it still hold up? Is it a worthy celebration of Sonic's past? Is it the crowning achievement of the series? And more importantly, will Sonic ever finish that chili dog? This is Sonic Generations. The game began development way back in 2009 when series director Takashi Iizuka realized there was no anniversary game planned for Sonic's 20th birthday. He pitched a tribute that was quickly accepted by Sega and the process began. Sega held an internal poll for their employees asking what their favorite levels from the games were. This included the Japanese, American, and European divisions as they all voiced their opinions. Sega even held a website asking their fans what their favorite levels were. In 2010, rumors of a Sonic Anniversary title began circulating, and it was alleged it would be released on all the major game consoles. That would include the Wii, PlayStation Portable, and Nintendo DS. However, on April 18, 2011, it was confirmed that it would be released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 instead. Nintendo Power confirmed in their June 2011 issue that a 3DS version was coming soon. Iizuka wanted to create a game that included the best of Sonic's history, and one that would hopefully provide more replay value than previous titles. They eventually decided to split the gameplay between the classic and modern games. Act 1 of every level would use classic Sonic, whereas Act 2 would focus on modern Sonic. They would feature their own take on the famous zones. They wanted to reimagine Sonic's games in high definition, so they decided they should make the game for both PS3 and Xbox 360. The development team did consider making a version for the Wii, but quickly abandoned it. According to Iizuka, the primary goal for the console versions of Generations was reimagining the series' classic zones in vivid high-definition graphics. Seeing that the Wii was graphically inferior and didn't support HD, Iizuka felt that it wasn't a good fit for the concept. The game was developed by Sonic Team and they had a little bit of help from DIMS, the same company that designed the Sonic Advance titles. The Windows port was handled by a company called Devil's Details, whereas DIMS handled the 3DS version. Sega actually did consider making the 3DS version a port of the console versions, and it might have worked, considering how powerful the hardware was. However, Sonic brand manager Aaron Weber confirmed in an interview that Sega wanted to create a unique experience, which is why the 3DS version is vastly different. The HD version used the infamous Hedgehog engine, the very same game engine that was used to create Sonic Unleashed. Sonic Team had a rule not to include older assets from previous games since they wanted to reintroduce the stages in brand new ways. This allowed for a new visual splendor, which would explain the underground caves found in Green Hill Zone. Of course, Sonic Mania would later break that rule by reusing assets, but it's hard to complain when the upscale graphics and 60 frames per second are so good. Sorry, I'm drooling. When working on the game, Iizuka admitted that adapting the 3D levels to 2D was a difficult task since they were built from the ground up to work in 3D. Which makes me wonder why they were so adamant about including 2D sections in modern Sonic, but whatever. It was also challenging to implement the classic style Sonic gameplay since the Hedgehog engine was designed for 3D gameplay. Yeah, you can tell they were struggling since classic Sonic has a tendency to spin into the foreground instead of left or right. Games like Sonic Colors may have been made for casual gamers, but with Sonic Generations, they wanted to appeal to the core crowd. In August 2009, Sega leaked a press release by mistake, which went by the name of Sonic Anniversary. It wouldn't be until April 7, 2011 when they officially revealed the trailer on their Facebook page. At the time this was revealed, there was so much hype for it. After experiencing so many subpar games, it looked as though Sonic was back. Aaron Webber had been approached by people who said, "I've not played a Sonic game in 15 years, but this looks amazing." The promise of being able to play classic Sonic stages in upscaled HD 3D was something less than exciting, more so than Sonic 4's back-to-basics gameplay. The fans eagerly awaited as Sega released the game for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 on November 1st, 2011 in the US. The Europeans would get their hands on it on the 4th of that month, while the Japanese would enjoy it on December 1st. It turned out to be a huge bestseller that sold 1.85 million copies by May 2012. OneUp.com proclaimed the game was living proof that Sega had learned from their mistakes, giving it a B. Eurogamer admitted that Sonic Generations still doesn't do much to dissuade us of the Hedgehog's best days or distant memories, but at least it is a worthy tribute to them. They gave the game a 7 out of 10. Famitsu gave it 1 8 and 3 9, saying, "It's not particularly novel, but the high speed and acceleration the series offers is definitely here." IGN gave it an 8.5, declaring that Sega finally managed to perfectly recapture what made this franchise so fun to begin with. With such critical acclaim, we can reasonably infer that Sonic Generations is still an excellent game, right? Well, don't be too sure. What was cool in the past is likely to be dated today, like Pogs, roller skates, and the Pet Rock. Thankfully, I never have to worry about falling into that trap as I'm hega hip and trendy. This groovy cat is on the level. You dig? When it comes to the game's story, it's little more than an excuse to commemorate Sonic's past. What I find remarkable is the fact the game doesn't even open with a cutscene. Instead, the game begins by having you control classic Sonic through a Green Hill Zone as you run through loop-de-loops, jump on springs, and defeat badniks. You get no cutscenes, no long-winded tutorials, none of that. You just cut straight to the action. For something that came out in 2011, that was incredibly refreshing. This may come across as off-putting to a lot of gamers who are used to watching 10-minute cutscenes at the start of every game, but it was a deliberate choice by Sega to pay homage to the classic era of games. In those days, the Sonic games didn't waste much time with story, they would just jump straight into the action. Besides, the game assumes you're already familiar with Sonic, so no introduction is needed. Once we get to the actual plot, we see that present-day Sonic is having a birthday with all his friends. We never learn just how old Sonic is at that point, but that hardly matters as a mysterious monster sweeps in and starts starting all the characters into different time portals. I just love the look of Sonic's face here. He's more concerned about the fact he lost his chili dog than he is about the impending danger. Sonic himself gets sucked in and finds himself in some strange limbo that's devoid of color and life. He then stumbles across a place that seems uncannily familiar and decides to go investigate it. He manages to restore life and color to it, rescuing Tails in the process. The Sonic of the past has also been privy to the strange events and decides to investigate as well, running into Classic Eggman. Classic Sonic defeats him, but Eggman gets kidnapped by the same creature that captured Sonic's friends. He eventually meets up with modern Sonic and Tails, as well as Classic Tails. The two Tails deduce that the strange monster has been ripping space and time apart, leaving the areas empty and dead. In doing so, they've ended up in this bizarre limbo called white space. So when the two Sonics accelerate, they manage to fix space, restoring color and life. Yeah, they never bothered to explain this bonkers plot. My guess is that since time has stopped running in this weird limbo, the physical properties of people and objects have degenerated into this weird state of inertia. The only way to reverse it is to generate kinetic energy via motion, thus regenerating the gears of time. Kinetic energy is defined as the work required to accelerate a body of a given mass from rest to its state of velocity. All this energy Sonic gives through running is enough to bring the worlds from their state of rest. This would give Sonic an excuse to run through the levels as he's usually not achieving some grand goal in them. It would have been nice if the game explained it a little better, like having Tails give Sonic some advanced techno-babble to annoy him with. "Hey Tails, we need to fix the time. That way we can get back to the present and have time move forward, instead of whatever this is."
Actually, Sonic,
Our perception of time is actually a naive assessment of its flow that's been oversimplified by scientists such as Newton and Einstein.
What?
You see, Sonic, according to my studies of thermodynamics and quantum mechanics, the flow of time might actually be a subjective feature of the universe, not an objective component of the physical description.
What are you talking about?
As I think of it, time is merely an illusion generated by our inability to perceive the universe in all its detail. Quantum uncertainty is defined by the fact we cannot know the positions and speeds of all the particles in the universe. If the opposite were true, then there would be no entropy, which is the lack of order and predictability. We would also have no unraveling of time. Also, did you know that the guy who introduced thermal time hypothesis got his interest in physics by taking LSD?
Can we just fight Eggman?
Okay, maybe I'm giving the writers too much credit, as it's doubtful they consider the scientific aspects of time and space. Overall, the story is fairly simple, and it does the time travel plot better than Sonic 06 ever did, mainly because it doesn't contradict itself with nearly as much convoluted nonsense and plot holes. Throughout the story, Sonic saves his friends and restores life to the zones he visits. By the game's climax, who should show up but Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik himself. Eggman found this weird time eater monster in space and decided to harness its power so he could travel through time effortlessly. Helping Eggman is his younger self, the poorly Eggman from the classic games. I would say that Eggman going back in time to have his younger self assist him would create problems for the time flow, resulting in a paradox.
Great Scott!
Nevertheless, Sonic stops him, preventing any of that from happening. For instance, if both Eggmans manage to kill the two Sonics, then younger Sonic will not live to see the future, and Eggman will have no need to deal with modern Sonic. Seeing this doesn't happen, Eggman's defeat was spelled out from the very beginning. Or we could disregard that and go by the Avengers logic that changing the past creates an alternate reality instead of changing the future. Either way, Eggman is destined to lose, as he admits as much in the game's ending.
Do we ever win? That depends on your definition of win. Beating Sonic? Oh, well then no. That doesn't give me much hope.
Still, seeing that classic Eggman was defeated, then why would he bother conducting this elaborate scheme to begin with? Then I realized, it's Eggman. Of course he would. This is the same guy who thought it was a good idea to battle Sonic using the exact same devices before, so he's obviously not the sort of guy who learns from his mistakes. Albert Einstein put it best: the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results.
Wow, will I really get that crazy?
What I find interesting is how classic Sonic never says a word. In fact, he's the only main character to remain silent. He's less like his chatty modern self and more like the silent protagonist you would expect from Nintendo, namely Mario and Link. He was originally going to have the voice of Jaleel White, something Aaron Webber insisted on. It would have been interesting to have Urkel reprise his role as Sonic, but the idea was quickly dropped and Classic Sonic was made into a new character. As Classic Sonic would say,
"That's no good."
Okay, so it's not that bad. As much as I enjoy Giulio's performance, I think keeping Classic Sonic silent was the better call. Frankly, there's something quite endearing about it as he communicates primarily through pantomime. The animation and facial expressions do a good job of capturing his quirky personality, and when you consider all the cheesy lines Sonic spewed on in the past few decades...
Oh yeah! This is happening! I found you! Faker, time to crack that Eggman wide open! Yeah, let's party! Okay then, let's get ready to do this. We'll show that creep the real superpower of teamwork!
It goes to show that less is more. Another fascinating thing about the story is the fact there was originally going to be 3 Sonics. One for the classic era, one for the Dreamcast era, and one for the modern era. The Dreamcast Sonic would have featured Ryan Drummond as the voice, the same guy who voiced him in the Sonic Adventure games.
Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. I like running better.
He turned down the offer as he didn't like the way Sega treated him. Now why could that be? Did it have something to do with the fact that Sega replaced him in the Sonic Adventure cast with a cast of 4 kids without bothering to tell them? Classy moves, Sega. In any case, I'm glad they dropped that plot as it would have complicated things. The thing that bugs me about the story is how low stakes it feels. In the Sonic Adventure games, the stakes were arguably lower. In Sonic Adventure 1, it was just Station Square that was in danger. In Sonic Adventure 2, the whole world was at risk of being destroyed. In Sonic Generations, the entire universe could collapse on itself, thanks to Eggman's careless tampering with time and space. So why isn't this more exciting? The problem is that the characters seem to regard the situation as more of a nuisance than a universe-shattering threat. Sure, Tails complains that he'll have nightmares from the whole ordeal, but it's played as a joke as Sonic barely reacts to him.
Thanks, Sonic. I thought I was dead, floating without a body in a black limbo. Ugh, I'm gonna have nightmares for weeks.
When Amy is rescued, she admits that she was worried that she would never be able to flirt with Sonic again, because that's her big priority, apparently. The seriousness of the situation is never given the weight it's due, instead playing more like a Saturday morning cartoon. Scratch that, the Saturday morning cartoon had a better time travel story. It was penned by the late Ben Hurst, and while imperfect, it captured the intricacies of time travel better than Sonic Generations ever could. The two-part Blast the Past episode was exciting because we got to see our heroes try to alter the course of history while learning the impending dangers of doing so. It was compelling having to see them have to deal with the dilemma of saving their past selves as well as Knothole, their resting grounds. It also served as a nice origin story for Robotnik and opened up the series world so we could see how things were before he took over. Sonic Generations doesn't come close to matching that level of writing, and I consider it to be one of the better Sonic stories in any medium. That story had more stakes, more tension, and far more thought put into it. Heck, even the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog had a better time travel story than Sonic Generations, and that cartoon was heckled for its poor writing and substandard comedy. The part I find uncanny is the scene in Sonic Generations where modern Sonic teaches his younger self how to do the boost. It's strangely reminiscent of a scene in Blast of the Past where present Sonic teaches his past self how to do a spinning move.
Whoa, I gotta try that.
Another thing that bugged me is how the characters are just one-dimensional caricatures of themselves. Knuckles is the goofy rival, Amy is the obsessed stalker, Shadow the edgy emo, and Silver is the moronic goof who can't tell that he's dealing with a real Sonic. In the Sonic Adventure games, they had moments of growth and introspection. That was a surprising complexity to their characters.
The professor said his life's work was dedicated to all of those who live down there. He once told that the reason for his existence was making people happy through the power of science.
Shadow.
Maria, I just don't know anything anymore. I often wonder why I was created, what my purpose is for being here. Maybe if I go down there, I will find the answers.
But with writers such as Ken Pontac and Warren Graff, all sense of subtlety is stripped away, which would explain the one-dimensional villains from Sonic Lost World. Instead, we got stereotypes and lame slapstick. To be fair, I can't fault them too much for this as Sonic Generations was made to focus on Sonic, so it doesn't leave the characters with much to do. Tails could have had a better role in the story, but like most modern Sonic games, it's usually relegated to being an exposition machine, so that sucks. If I could nitpick one last time, I hate how Sega managed the continuity. In Sonic Generations, it's clear that places like Green Hill and Chemical Plant are a part of Sonic's past. Yet in Sonic Forces, they contradict that by pretending that classic Sonic is.
That's Sonic from another dimension, aren't you?
So which is it, Sega? I may have my misgivings with the story, but I won't deny the game does have a few amusing moments. For instance, I enjoy seeing classic Sonic mimicking modern Sonic's actions in the mirror. I also like seeing Sonic preventing Amy from kissing him, as well as Sonic commentating about his past adventures, showing some degree of self-awareness.
This place looks like something sucked all the life and color out of it. Totally strange.
No stranger than rescuing genies in magic books or saving aliens in an interstellar amusement park.
The best scenes would have to include modern Eggman interacting with his classic self. Speaking of which, I have always enjoyed Mike Pollock's portrayal as Dr. Eggman, and it's no small wonder why Sega decided to keep him. He's the one voice actor that stayed while the rest of the 4Kids cast jumped ship. In fact, a lot of the modern actors have left while he's still on board. He's easily the best actor in the game, and you can tell that he's having fun with his role.
What time is it? It's the exact same time as when you asked earlier, and it'll be the exact same time when you ask later. There is no time here!
Pollock delivers the raw energy and sadistically the Mad Doctor is known for, and his scenery chewing is never less than entertaining. Roger Craig Smith does a decent job of voicing Sonic, but I was never a huge fan of his. His voice always sounded kind of bland to me, but he does project the enthusiasm Sonic is known for. He manages to deliver his lines well, as taggy as they are.
I can't believe this! I was supposed to beat you this time!
I'm sorry. I didn't get that memo. I beat you every time.
Kate Haynes voices Tails, and she's okay, even though she makes him sound feminine.
What's Eggman even doing here? I thought you said he'd been kidnapped by that big weird thing that sent us all to this place.
Outside of Sonic, Tails, and Eggman, the rest is somewhat mixed. I don't like Kirk Thorne as Shadow because he sounds like a guy who's trying way too hard to sound edgy.
You've got this, Sonic.
Knuckles is so-so,
Thanks for the help. Not that I needed it.
but hearing Cream the Rabbit is pure cringe.
Thanks for saving me, Sonic. It was scary in the dark, but I tried to be brave.
In fact, was there ever a time she sounded pleasant? It's as if the voice actors choose the most annoying voice they can muster up. Amy is okay, and Blaze is pretty good. As for the game's music, it was composed by Jun Senoue, and when you consider how good it is, you have to wonder what went wrong with Sonic 4. In that game, the music sounded so bland and uninspired. My guess is that he ran out of inspiration, so the best he could do was recycle classic Sonic music. At least that's my theory. For what it's worth, Sonic Generations boasts some of his finest work as the remixes are awesome, and he even composed some unlockable music to treat your ears with. Joining him is his band Crush 40, as well as Richard Jacks, Hideki Naganuma, Naofumi Ataya, Cash Cash, and more. The game begins with a traditional Sonic theme originally composed by Masato Nakamura, remixed by Jun Senoue. Afterwards, we're treated to the classic Green Hill theme, also by Nakamura, only this time it's remixed by Naofumi Ataya. The second act was remixed by Jun Senoue, and there you notice that each act has its own take on the songs. The levels are split between a classic 2D version and a modern 3D version. For Green Hill, the classic song sounds a lot like the original game. If anything, it sounds like the original tune was remastered as it no longer had to deal with the restraints of the Genesis sound chip. As usual, the tune is energetic and bursting with life, a perfect way to describe Green Hill Zone. The modern version is faster and it's appropriate, considering that modern Sonic's levels are faster by design. As a result, it's more frantic and exuberant, as if the song is telling you there's no time to waste. Gone is the original chip tune, being replaced with real instruments like the guitar, the bass, the drums, the trumpet, the horn, the tenor sax, the clarinet, and even the trombone. They really went all out with these remixes, and you can feel the love they put into them. Chemical Plant Act 1 is close to the original game, only that it slaps hard and it's enough to make you want to tap your feet. The modern version, on the other hand, sounds a lot more threatening. In the first act, it felt as though you were having fun running around the chemical plant, but here you can tell that some serious stuff is going down and you have to put a stop to it. This is the one song that diverges the most from the 16-bit games, but that guitar work and distortion make for one heck of a trippy ride. It's great that we got a remastered version of the Sky Sanctuary theme, as it was among the best Sonic & Knuckles had to offer. It's not only beautiful, but it's majestic as well. It really feels as though you're soaring through the heavens. When it comes to the modern remix, it's decidedly less retro, but it managed to bring the score to life in a whole new way. The bass and drum work are simply marvelous, as is the synth work. It's exactly how I'd imagine a Mario version to sound like. Speed Highway originally appeared on the Dreamcast and was composed by Jun Senoue. Here the Act 1 stage is remixed by Cash Cash. Like Senoue's theme, it makes heavy use of the guitar to give this level a cool vibe, only this time it's more reliant on electric sounds, being more techno in nature. Senoue remixes the second act, so it's no surprise it would sound more faithful. Instead of electronic instruments, it's more reliant on traditional bass and drums. Either way, the song and lyrics are a good description of the series. The franchise has had its ups and downs and all-arounds. If I had to choose, I would side with Act 2 as I prefer the instrumentals. City Escape continues with the game's trend, having a guest artist composed for the classic act, and having the original artist composed for the modern act. Escape from the City was originally composed by Jun Senoue with Ted Poley writing the lyrics. Poley performed the song with Tony Harnell, and they would do so again in Act 2. It was one of my favorite songs from Sonic Adventure 2, and I love this remix. It sounds even wilder than the original, and the lyrics really define Sonic. The Act 1 theme performed by Cash Cash is also pretty good, and what do you know, they gave this song the techno treatment too.
Rolling around at the speed of sound.
It's slower paced, but classic Sonic is more about platforming than sheer bursts of speed, so it's fitting. I personally would have liked to have seen these composers remix these sort of tunes with a Genesis sound chip to see what they could come up with. After all, classic Sonic is running in them. Still, when the remixes are this good, I can't really complain. Seaside Hill was a solid tune from Sonic Heroes and it was cool to hear it here. It was first composed by Jun Senoue, so composer Richard Jack steps in to try his hand at it. Jun Senoue provides the guitars for him, but the overall programming is all Jack's, which will explain why it sounds similar. In fact, it sounds a little too similar for my taste and I wish Jack's had done more to make it his own. Not surprisingly, Senoue would have the remix of Act 2, and the added instruments such as the bass, drums, and piano make it sound that much better. If you play the game back in the GameCube days, you're likely to remember the stupid quotes like,
I'm falling!
Thankfully, you don't have to put up with the lame dialogue here. Just as the level embodied the best that Sonic Heroes had to offer, the song does likewise as it's catchy and a joy to listen to. In between levels, you'll walk across some hub world known as the White Space. There you're treated to an upbeat medley, despite the fact the world has been drained of its color and vitality. When you walk across the gateways to the actual levels, you can hear orchestral arrangements and some neat little remixes of them. It's a pretty cool way to get you pumped for these levels. Eventually we get to the Crisis State level, originally composed by Tomoya Otani. He would return to remix the tune for both acts. The first act is more rushed compared to the original version. The second act is a bit more traditional, but they both convey the sense of panic you're going through in this post-apocalyptic world. The modern version is more hectic, while the classic version is more distraught. Say what you will about Sonic 06, but that game had awesome music. It's a shame it was wasted on such a bad game. The original was a bit more subtle, but I love the bombastic approach that Generations offers. When hearing both songs, you know that everything is falling apart and you don't have much time left. Rooftop Run was another song composed by Otani and Sonic Unleashed, and the original was more rocking. The classic version in Generations is more orchestral as the piano, bass, and drums play a more prominent role. The song gives me the feeling that Sonic is reaching out his hand to the player, as if he's inviting them on a grand adventure. As for the modern remix, it sounds a little closer to the original theme, and I love the frenetic pace of the song. It sounds spirited, yet somewhat lighthearted, as if it just wants you to have a good time. Finally, we get to the Planet Wisp theme, taken from Sonic Colors. It was composed by Kenichi Tokoi, so naturally he would handle the remix himself. The classic version sounds surprisingly dark, whereas the original was far more soothing. This song lets you know that things aren't going to be easy, especially considering how long these levels last. The modern rendition is a more faithful adaptation, but it's not quite as ambient nor as gentle as the original. It has delightful piano work, but the mood is more rushed. It's a lovely rendition all the same as you get a sense of the planet's beauty. Aside from the main stages, the bosses get their own remixes like the Metal Sonic theme. The Japanese version of Sonic CD was composed by Naofumi Ataya, and it's nice to see that he would provide an excellent remix of the score. Still, I have to admit it never sounded all that threatening to me, as it sounds more like a raid party than a battle. The American version was composed by Spencer Nilsson, and it's a shame he couldn't return to do a remix. Instead, they got Alex Macklock from Cash Hash fame to do it, and he fails to do justice to Nilsson's original vision. It was the one remix I was really disappointed by, and I hate how he slowed the tempo down. The sedate tone does nothing to match the ferocity of the original, and Sonic Forces did a better remix. The Shadow Boss theme from Sonic Adventure 2 was originally composed by Heigo Tani and Fumiko Watani. Here it would be remixed by Circuit Freak. It sounds a bit more emo than the original, which totally fits Shadow. There are times when the song meanders, as if it's drowning in its own misery. Shadow's clearly not a happy person, and you can feel the angst that defines him. Silver's theme is one of my favorite among the bosses that is so warped and intense. It's a theme that screams, you better run for your life if you know what's good for you. Of course, Silver would have you believe.
It's no use!
The Death Egg Robot theme was an awesome tune for Sonic 2 as it was epic, dramatic, and tense. The orchestrated version does wonders for it as it's even more cinematic. It's a perfect endgame for classic Sonic, although he has plenty more levels later on. When it comes to the Egg Dragoon theme, I enjoy it for how frazzled it is. Seeing we are not playing as a werehog, the tempo is naturally speedier. It's as if the theme is screaming, "Oh no! Eggman is attacking you with his deadliest weapon ever! Whatever will you do?" You can feel the despair in the notes, yet you still feel compelled to press on. Still, it's annoying to hear Eggman shout, "Time for a change of pace," every 10 seconds. Open Your Heart was the signature theme for Sonic Adventure and has been through numerous remixes. As far as apocalyptic songs go, it's one of the best the series has to offer as it really sells the desperation, and sounds even more unhinged here. The original sounded more heroic, while this one sounds more, shall I say, chaotic? Other Sonic themes have been mixed, such as Sonic 2's results menu. It feels so nice to hear a remaster, plus there's something so gay about it that you just want to bob your head. As for the collection room, it features a wonderful orchestral remix of Door into Summer, originally composed by Enrico Nanba. Although Knuckles Chaotix didn't sell very well, it was thoughtful of Sega to include it as one of the more well-liked tunes from that game. Jun Senoue works his magic on it, and the remix is nothing short of perfection. The orchestrated mix is relaxing, and the violin work is just sick. The gallery theme is taken from the File Select theme of Sonic 3, which I assume was created by Senoue. His remix is a much softer version, relying on the violin and flute. I enjoy it for what it is, but it doesn't have the tribal flavor the original did. If anything, steel drums would have fit better. But whatever, the cafe rendition works. It's the type of thing you'd hear as you're browsing through stuff. I always enjoy the character select theme from Sonic Heroes, and it was a pleasure to see it return here as well. In fact, I've been using the Sonic Heroes theme on my 3DS for the longest time, and it's the first thing I hear whenever I open it. I like it so much, there are times when I just let it linger for a bit before starting a game. Sonic sums up this theme succinctly.
Let's blast through with Sonic speed!
It's a perfect start to a new adventure. Menu 2 is the online mode, and it took me completely by surprise. For those who don't know, it comes from Sonic Mega Collection, the anthology that launched for GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2. It was composed by Hideki Kobayashi, who would also remix it for Generations. It was great hearing it again, as it showed that Sega was willing to cover all the bases, not just the mainstream games. Speaking of which, they also include Super Sonic Racing. I was never a huge fan of Sonic R, but I always enjoyed its soundtrack. The song was written and composed by Richard Jacks, and Cash Cash did a wonderful job on the remix.
Introducing Sega Saturn.
Everybody Super Sonic Racing. Gotta keep your feet right on the ground. When you're Super Sonic Racing, there's no time to look around. When you're Super Sonic Racing, run into the point of no return. Everybody Super Sonic Racing. Come on, let the fire burn.
It's another song that sums up the series as a whole, and those lyrics will never leave my head. I especially love the line, "Introducing Sega Saturn." I never owned the console, but it was a cool shout out for fans who grew up in the 90s. It would have been nice if the Saturn had a proper 3D Sonic game though, instead of this. Sonic 3D Blast is not the most beloved Sonic game, but the Saturn version did have a lovely title theme. It was originally composed by Richard Jacks, and his work on the series goes beyond the Saturn games. Remix isn't as fast as the original, but it does have a dreamy quality to it. I love it because there's a sense of optimism about it, as if the song is telling you that you got this, so it's going to be okay. This is especially evident in the Friends missions, and it's another favorite of mine. There are a lot of other remixes in the game, and some of them you can unlock by completing certain missions. You'll get to hear new versions of classic songs like Hydro City, Angel Island, Lee Forest, and more. If remakes aren't your thing, don't worry, Sonic Generations has you covered, as you can listen to the original recordings of tunes like Sonic Boom, Emerald Hill, Metal Harbor, and His World. What makes it even cooler is the fact you can play whatever music you want at any given level. If you don't care for the Green Hill remixes, just play the level with the original. You can play Chemical Plant Zone with the original Genesis theme instead of the remixes. If you don't like the Perfect Chaos remix, just set the original and you're good to go. It's fun seeing how the feel of the level changes depending on what music you play, so try it out. When it comes to the final boss, I enjoy this theme for how climactic and melodramatic it is.
I love the howling vocals, and it even has a Latin choir.
This is one of the few original themes to appear in the game, and it's another one composed by the indispensable Richard Jacks, although Junsanoi handled the guitar work. There are two variations of the song, both handled by them. The second version is when you switch to classic Sonic, and it sounds a bit more retro. The theme puts a lot of pressure on you as Eggman is one step away from conquering the universe, and it's all on you. Despite the dread, you shouldn't feel too overwhelmed as you're controlling two Sonics, plus the boss is easy. The Pièce de Resistance would have to be the final attack theme that plays once you beat Eggman. It starts off by playing the Live and Learn theme from Sonic Adventure 2, only to switch to the Sonic 4 theme. I love how the first few notes were created just to troll the audience. As funny as that is, the sped up version of Sonic 4 is an amazing denouement as you truly feel invincible, as if nothing's gonna stand in your way. As cool as Super Sonic is in the finale, I'm afraid that nobody thought to give him a super theme for the regular levels. It's so disappointing as it's such a wasted opportunity. It's especially hard to fathom when you consider the fantastic score composed by T. Lopes in Sonic Mania. I mean, seriously, they were able to create a remix of Neo Green Hill, yet they couldn't make a Super Sonic theme? Oh, whatever. The quality of the soundtrack is so good that I can't hold it against them. As much as you'd like me to continue blathering on about Sonic music, it's time to get to the graphics. For a game that came out in 2011, this looks remarkably good. All the characters look great, and the levels are just bursting with color and life. The incredible detail is just breathtaking to behold, and you can see that they spared no expense. I love how they were able to bring back classic levels in fresh new ways, and the HD treatment made them appear lovelier than ever. The colors are exquisite, and there are tons of little things like the grass that flows with the wind. The blur effects that appear when you're running really sells a sense of speed. Sure, they've taken some liberties like making Sky Sanctuary white instead of yellow, but who cares when it's so beautiful? When I came back to this game, I was amazed to see that it held up as well as it did. Not bad for a game that was released 10 years ago. As good as it is, there are a few dated parts like the tinting on the characters. The characters look as though they have glass eyes, which is weird. The in-game cutscenes do look rather stiff in places, and I do wish they had taken more time to smooth them out. I mean, yeah, it's better than the motion capture found in Sonic Adventure 2, but this came out on advanced hardware, so you'd expect that sort of thing. The developers gave a hard look at the classic Sonic games, and it's reassuring that they understood why they looked so good. One of the things that made the Sonic series so exceptional was not just the fact it was fun to play, it was also fun to look at. Seeing the stages blazed by is the video game equivalent of a roller coaster, and you really feel as though you're part of the momentum. This led to some of the most visceral thrills of the 16-bit generation, and Sega recaptured that feeling with the 3D games. A key contributing factor to the thrill is the beautiful stages. At first this may seem like an oxymoron. You're traveling so fast, so what difference does it make how the stages look if you can't stop to appreciate them? If the stages were simply boring boxes with one shade of color, they wouldn't make for an exciting experience. The imaginative stages like Green Hill and Oil Ocean gave Sonic its unique flavor. They were special experiences because they were experiences that could only happen in Sonic's world. You can always admire the gorgeous backdrops when the game automates, or you can simply visit the stage again as you're likely to pick up on the finer details. Seeing beautiful worlds swift by is an experience like no other, and even if you can't conceive it all at once, all the images stick in your head and leave an impression that makes them so pleasing. In all good art, it doesn't matter if you don't notice every brushstroke or shade of color the artist used. What matters is how the art speaks to you and what experience you gain from it. Sonic the Hedgehog is very much an aesthetic experience, and it figures that Sega's best artists would be called to work on the series. As much as I enjoy the art, there are times when it can be a problem. The game often works in this weird 2D, 3D hybrid where the backgrounds morph into the foreground. I can usually stomach it, but there are times when I have trouble telling if certain scenery is something I can interact with, or if it's a part of the background. This has ended up in a lot of mistakes, and it's not the sort of problem you would encounter in a sprite game. As far as the frame rate goes, the PC version was able to run at the maximum frame rate of 60, while the console version settled for 30. It looks less vibrant than the console versions, but it does include more shadows. No, not that shadow. However, the cutscenes are locked at 30 frames and it's really obvious. The in-game frame rate is good, but flawed as it constantly drops, and there are even times when the game pauses for a second or two before resuming. Methinks the Hedgehog engine could have used some fine-tuning. Regardless, it's fascinating to see how much the series had evolved over time. The game is divided into 3 eras. The first is the Genesis era, otherwise known as the First Era. This involves the Genesis trilogy, as you would expect. The second era is the Dreamcast era, which includes Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. There is also a level from Sonic Heroes, although that appeared on GameCube, not Dreamcast. This era should have been called the GameCube era, as the Sonic Adventure games appeared on that platform too. Finally, there's the third era, simply known as the Modern Era. It includes stages from Sonic 06, Sonic Unleashed, and Sonic Colors. The first era delves into the fantastical with levels such as Green Hill and Chemical Plant, only to jump into the hyper-realistic settings of the second era. The third era takes a turn for the dark with Crisis City, only to return to the hyper-realism of Rooftop Run. The last stage flirts with the sci-fi genre as it takes place on a distant planet inhabited by aliens. Out of all the eras, I would say the first era is the strongest visually. You can tell with the early Genesis games that the developers really set out to create unique worlds, and their vision pushed the Genesis to its very limit. Green Hill is often shown because it's not only a trademark of the franchise, it's a unique setting that demonstrates the unparalleled imagination of the Sega staff. At least for the time. There was nothing like it at the time it debuted back in 1991, and it makes me wish that Sega would come up with something half as imaginative, instead of constantly recycling it. The checkerboard walls, tone poles, green grass, loop-de-loops, and art that will convey an incredible fantasy world, and it's one that Sega's only rarely matched creative-wise. Sonic Generations reimagines Green Hill Zone and brings it to us in HD glory. Subtle little details emerge such as the improved lighting, the underground caverns, the islands in the distance, and the added plant life. It's even more vibrant than the Genesis original, and it never looked busier. It looks so pretty that you can't help but want to pause the game and just gawk at it. I love the fact that sunflowers still have their limited animations, and it's a great nod to the original. Chemical Plant, on the other hand, is based on real-world chemical plants, but it's not like the chemical plants you're likely to see in real life. Instead of making it realistic, Sega employed bright colors and unique backdrops to create an expressionist portrayal of a chemical plant. In other words, it's a fantasy rendering of a chemical plant, rather than a realistic one. The plant itself is murky with tons of gizmos, plus it's saturated in a cold, mechanical gray. The city in the background is a lovely work of futurism, and the added shadows make it appear more ominous than ever. Despite this, the colors that really draw your attention are the abundant amounts of blues and yellows. You can see why Sega chose them as they're synonymous with the Sonic brand, plus they pop against the dreary backgrounds. What's more, the color scheme stands as a solid metaphor for the struggle between Sonic and Robotnik. The bright yellow and blue represent Sonic, while the dark grays and reds represent Robotnik. If Green Hill stood for freedom and life, then Chemical Plant stands for Robotnik's ugly machinations. Unlike Green Hill, there are no signs of life, no joy to be had here. Instead, it's a polluted planet, smoke is rising and toxic waste is constantly being dumped. Aside from looking striking, Chemical Plant has managed to resonate among Sonic fans as a good example of the struggle between Sonic and Robotnik. The planet even has a life of its own as the blue sludge moves as it pleases, as do the blocks. The second act takes a turn for the nastier as explosions constantly erupt, and you can see broken pieces of construction, as well as tubes. It's there you see Eggman's failings as a scientist. As smart as he is, he's completely unfit for ruling the world as he can't keep his own planet from falling apart. This point is further accentuated in the climax when Tails remarks he is destroying time and space. Sky Sanctuary is the least faithful of the first era, but the incredible amount of detail is just gorgeous to behold. You get to visit an arboretum in the heavens as you walk across this abandoned civilization that's been taken over by bots. Sky Sanctuary is the most cinematic of the Genesis era, as a lot of filmic scenes appear like the rising of the Death Egg, and the crumbling of ancient architecture. The design is paradoxical in a way. The overall look and sound to it is heavenly, yet it's filled with enemies and traps that are trying to kill you. It's obviously due to Eggman's takeover, and it underscores how much of an impact he can have on such a peaceful location. We already saw a bit of that in Green Hill, but here the effect is more devastating as the structure is toppling against itself, thanks to Eggman. This glorious Lapital-like world is exactly what I mean when the Genesis side games aim for a fantastical ambience. It's less like a human world and more like visiting the home world of the gods or some higher beings. That's what gives the level its mystical charm, and I appreciate how they add some new areas like the indoor parts. The glowing panels and teleports just add to that mystical vibe, and it's a place I would love to visit if it were real. Oh, and here's a fun bit of trivia for you. When you look at the stage from White Space, you can see grapes hanging off it. Why is that significant? That's because in Sonic 3's manual it's confirmed that Knuckles' favorite food is grapes. These developers didn't miss a spot. After finishing Sky Sanctuary, we enter the Dreamcast era, and it's when Sega decided to make Sonic quote-unquote realistic. I never got Sega's obsession with that, as Sonic was designed to be anything but realistic. A large part that made the series so charming was the fact he would visit wondrous worlds you could never hope to see in real life. So putting him in a human world didn't exactly do wonders for the series. If anything, they served to make the Sonic cast out of place, and it's especially evident in games like Sonic 06. The movie is one of the few times where it kind of works, but I would rather see more of Sonic in Green Hill Zone than Green Hills, Montana. And before you comment, yes, I know it's not a real place. Regardless, Sega did come up with some clever ideas for the human world, like turning the highways into corkscrews. The design of these highways is incredibly impractical, and it's unfathomable to think that anyone would ever drive in such a world. They resemble the ones you've come to know, but they're less of a means of public transportation and more of an obstacle course for Sonic to run through. The screwy turns fit Sonic nicely as the surreal settings feel like a dream. What's more, the level is saturated in a hazy blue hue that only adds to the dreamlike atmosphere of the level. It was present in the Dreamcast original, but ruined in the director's cut. Here it not only looks like a dream, but most would say it plays like one too, which is why it was one of the most requested zones. And that is the magic of video games. They can create worlds that strongly resemble our own, but with a few twists and turns, sometimes quite literally. If you look closely, you can see signs for characters like Blaze, Omega, and Shadow as a fun little Easter egg. The reason why this level was included was, aside from looking pretty, it contains some of the most eye-catching moments in the series. Like that exciting moment when Sonic ran down a building to launch himself out of a rocket. A lot of moments were created for show, whether Sonic was running through a corkscrew highway or hanging from a helicopter. They actually added a bunch of details like the inside of the hotels where you can see hallways, escalators, elevators, and gymnasiums. There are actual cars to add to the feeling it's a lived-in world, although you never really buy it. City Escape goes for even greater realism as it's apparently based on San Francisco. The houses and park resemble places you've seen before, aside from the robots and giant buzzsaw-wielding truck that tries to kill you. The odd part is that despite the developers' insistency on realism, you don't see any actual humans in these worlds. It's as if Sonic's running in cities taken over by robots. The stage is so vivid, thanks to the lively colors. All those buildings you see make the world seem so expansive, and there are even little things like the Mighty and Ray posters. It was before they made their long-awaited comeback in Sonic Mania Plus. Out of all the 3D Sonic stages, this would have to be the one that screams Dreamcast the most. Its flashy colors and street setting is reminiscent of a lot of Dreamcast games like Sonic Adventure, Jet Set Radio, and Crazy Taxi. It's one of those stages that just screams cool, or at least doing its darndest to be cool, which exemplify the Dreamcast marketing.
You feel the glove, love. Yo, what's your name? Gary Payton, but they call me the glove. How you feeling tonight? Yo, I'm feeling the love.
And that scene with the truck is the definition of spectacle. It's noisy, rampant, rapid, and outright chaotic. Just look at all the damage it's doing. Cars fly around like they're rag dolls, killing dozens of innocent lives. Leave it to the military to be the bigger threat than the one they pursue. It's in this level where you begin to notice a trend, and that trend is an overabundance of city levels. It's not to say these things aren't cool, but as a whole they're far less imaginative than the stuff you've seen before. In the Sonic Adventure games, the stages may have looked pretty for their time, but they lose a bit of their magic when you realize you can mistake them for any other game if you took out Sonic. I'm afraid the same principle applies here. You can't say the same thing with Green Hill or Chemical Plant, which is why I'm less enthused with Sonic being in the real world. Sonic Heroes made a more earnest attempt to be like the Genesis games in looks and playability, although it wasn't always successful. The checkerboard pattern is obviously stolen from Green Hill, but they were mindful to change it to a beach setting. If City Escape embodied the Dreamcast, then Seaside Hill embodied the GameCube. Yeah, I know that Sonic Heroes came out on other consoles, but the graphics were tailor-made for the GameCube as everything appears so bright and shiny. Here, Sonic Team was trying to get back to the roots of the franchise, disregarding the realism that permeated the last two games. Seaside Hill was one of the most memorable levels in the game, and it was great to see an HD version of it. The water had never looked more gorgeous, and the stage is a combination of the two acts that made the level. The red and white decor is particularly eye-catching, and it's the most fantastical-looking stage in the second era. Aside from the Green Hill inspiration, the various mountains and islands resemble whales, and that's a cool touch. Although I do have to admit there is something cool-looking about all those whale statues. Are they beings of worship? In the third era we get another city level. The pyro monsters look great, as do the lava and heat waves, but the level looks like every other post-apocalyptic city you've ever seen. The tone is a bit bleaker than you'd expect from a Sonic game, as it looks as though Sonic has descended into the pits of hell. Graphically speaking, the level's most inspired moment is when Sonic is running through the final stretch as flames burst from the ground and debris is flying straight at you. After that we get another city level. What a shock! Rather than being in San Francisco, it resembles a European town. If you play Sonic Unleashed, you will recognize it as Spagonia. Apparently the citizens have reason to rejoice as confetti is thrown everywhere. Why? I don't know. It's been a long time since I played Unleashed. The level has some interesting set pieces like the giant barrels and clock, but the overall look is not very creative. I don't care about Spagonia or whatever generic human country say you decide to rename. It's another one of those levels that, if you took out Sonic, you could easily mistake it for another game. To its credit, I do like the image of Sonic sliding down the rails into the city as he goes past the balloons. It's very picturesque and one of the best scenes in the level. I also like the Indiana Jones death trap, and seeing Sonic smash a few bosses into each other is very satisfying. We finally get to Planet Wisp, and it's a great looking stage. Sega had a knack for getting the most out of the Wii as Sonic Colors was one of the best looking games for that system. After having to endure all the city levels, it was a relief to play something different. The idea of Sonic running around an interstellar amusement park does have its appeal, but there are no attractions to be had here. Instead, the level takes inspiration from Act 1 and 4 of the Planet Wisp area. The level brings back the fantastical elements of the Genesis games, while adding a dash of Mario Galaxy to the mix. Some of the classic enemies are back, such as Caterkiller and Buzz Bomber. Yes, I know they're called sandworms, but they're referred to as Caterkillers in Japan, so I'm technically right. The Eggpons have a bit more personality here, so they're looking quite smug, and they can be a bit more dangerous than they're letting on. The first half in Mars Sonic's level looks wonderful as the lush greenery is exquisitely detailed. Going back to the original Sonic Colors game, you can see what a difference HD makes. It makes me wish the Wii support as the jagged look hasn't aged well. That way I wouldn't have to buy Sonic Colors Ultimate. The frame rate is also vastly improved, making for a more seamless experience. Although the Wisp World has a slight resemblance to our own, there's plenty of purple Kool-Aid and a giant globe in the background to remind you you're on an alien planet. It starts off natural at first, but as you get deeper into the level you notice all this construction as Eggman is attempting to take over the planet. The changes in the background and the overall look are heavily reminiscent of Sonic CD, albeit without the anime cutscenes. It shouldn't surprise me to know that the construction side is going red, as it's Eggman's trademark color. Graphics-wise, the boss titans are pretty dazzling as it was such a treat seeing the Metal Sonic boss fight up to HD. Have you ever noticed that whenever Sega feels the need to reference Sonic CD, they like to go with the bad future? It happened in this game, and it happened again with Sonic Mania Plus. So I guess the grim reality is that Sonic failed to stop Eggman. Regardless, the bad future is always cooler looking than the good future as it highlights the threat Eggman poses to Sonic and his friends. Still, it's nice to know that even in a city that's been ravaged by Eggman, you can still ride the Ferris wheel. This dark, urban, futuristic city is just plain cool to look at, and they could have built an entire level around it. Equally as good is the Death Egg boss from Sonic 2. If gamers thought that the final boss for Sonic 2 was cinematic, they hadn't seen nothing yet. There's so many details all over the place, like the lights and pieces of machinery that take up the background, plus it's a fitting end for the classic Sonic boss fights. The Death Egg robot does look a bit goofy in hindsight, but the music and Star Wars inspired imagery really sells this fight. Which brings us to Perfect Chaos. The water effects never looked so good in the original Sonic Adventure, and neither has Chaos. Let's face it, whenever you go back to play that game, Chaos looks kind of silly. He looks like a watery sock puppet when you're not watching the CGI cutscenes, but here he's at his most intimidating. His reptilian skin, coupled with his spikes, make him appear more bestial, plus his liquid parts no longer resemble Jello. Aside from the improved character models, the fact there's far more wanton destruction as Chaos smashes through the buildings. It's an improvement over the Dreamcast version as Chaos lives up to his name as the God of Destruction, even more so here. In case you should tire of the main game, you can always play a little pinball. The Casino Night pinball level has to be one of the most visually striking sections of the game. The bright lights and millions of colors really assault your eyes, make you wish they had toned it down a bit. If they were trying to emulate the high energy aesthetics of Las Vegas, then they succeeded admirably, as the brightness will require the use of shades. It's a beautiful looking pinball stage, but it's awfully busy as the imagery competes so much for your attention, so much so that it's easy to lose track of the ball. Still, I love the furnishings such as the Golden Tail statue, the mile signs, the poker chips, and the casino night theme. And that about wraps it up for this video. Check me out next week when I answer the big question, does the gameplay hold up? Is Sonic Generations truly a worthy celebration? Find out next time on the Memsive YouTube channel.